Hello everybody, my name is Wendy Holden and I am a journalist and an author and a ghostwriter, and I had the very great privilege 2 years ago of working with the inimitable Edna Adan Ismail on this book, A Woman of Verse, which is now out in paperback. I think, Edna, you have a copy there of the paperback, so very different covers, but both available. It was just the most marvelous experience, and best of all, we became firm friends. So that's been a great blessing to me for sure. Just to fill you in on those of you who might not have heard of Edna, she's known as the Muslim Mother Teresa. She suffered imprisonment, mutilation, persecution, civil war. She's endured it all for the people of Africa. The daughter of Somaliland's best-loved doctor, Edna saw firsthand how poor healthcare, lack of education, and ancient superstitions had devastating effects on her people, especially its women. And when she suffered the trauma of FGM as a young girl, she experienced it for herself. Edna's determination was set. Things had to change. From being the first girl in her country to win an educational scholarship in Britain, to becoming the first midwife to practice in Somaliland, Edna grew into a formidable teacher and campaigner for women's health. As her country was swept up in a bloody fight for independence, Edna rose to become its first lady and its first female cabinet minister. But even as she was courted by presidents and kings, this extraordinary woman never forgot her roots. Having retired from a leading role in the World Health Organization, Edna built her own hospital brick by brick, and at, forgive me Edna, 82 years old, she still works there, training future generations in what has been hailed as one of the Horn of Africa's finest university hospitals. And yes, she still occasionally delivers babies herself and thinks of herself as simply a midwife. So Edna, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, as they say, once a midwife, always a midwife.
Absolutely. And what most people can't believe is that you're 82, I have to tell you. So a lot of people watching this will want
Wendy, you're cheating me of 1 year. I'm 83. I was 83 on the 8th of this month.
Oh, well, happy birthday belatedly, and congratulations. 83, it's even more astounding. So whatever you're doing it right.
Well, some days I think I'm doing it right. Some days I think, what am I doing? I should have retired 25 years ago. But I feel very blessed, Wendy. It's true. I couldn't have done anything better in this life. No. I love what I'm doing. It's my job. It's my hobby. It's my passion. I love when I look around the students that I've trained, who've become teachers themselves. There's one of them working for the World Health Organization. There's one working with the Tropical Health and Education Trust, a UK charity that has offices here in Somaliland, connected with King's College Hospital. My former referral hospital, yes. I was a midwife on Denmark Hill. Now, I don't think any woman has had a bigger gift than that.
No.
When my students, my former students in my lifetime are holding positions that any Somali girl would never have even dreamt about.
Absolutely.
So I'm very blessed.
And your passion for it shines out of you. I think that's really, it does shine out of you. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me, please, when and where you were born, and tell me a little bit about your father, who was such an important role in your life.
Yes, well, I was born on the 8th of September in 1937, just a few years ago. I was born in a hospital. I have scars on my head. I was a forceps baby. I survived that. I grew up in my country and grew up wherever my dad was based. And every 2 years he would be transferred to a new hospital or to a new region of my country, British Somaliland Protectorate. That's the correct name of my country. And just so that it gives you a perspective of the location of my country, there is French Somaliland, which is now the Republic of Djibouti. There's British Somaliland Protectorate. And then there's neighboring Italian Somalia, the one that's been giving the world and us a whole lot of problems.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
having, all kinds of things. It's always in the news, all for the wrong reasons. So I'm from...
Your father had been trained, hadn't he, by the British? He wasn't an actual doctor, but he was known as Adan Ismail because he was...
which was also the British colony of Aden. Of course, being Somalilander, the British, there was a protectorate in Yemen and a protectorate in Somaliland, and any health professionals, there were no health professions in Somaliland, so Dad was brought over from Aden. He grew up, where he trained, where he worked at the time, and to come and train others in Somaliland.
And you used to help him out in the hospital, didn't you? Tell me about that, helping him out.
I'm sorry?
You used to help him out in the hospital. Tell me about that.
Yes, well, of course, as I grew up and as we always lived near the hospital. So the hospital was my playground, but my pastime. And I admired so much what my dad was doing. And I wanted to help him. And I would always hear how frustrated he would be about needing help with this or needing help with something else, needing instruments, and, scissors that would cut, and forceps that work. And I didn't know what forceps were or what one did with scissors, except cutting things with it. And he would trust me with rolling up bandages and ironing, cutting up strips from old sheets that we him and I would, talk my mother out of it and say, oh, this is too old. Why don't you give it to the hospital? Because we knew that we needed bandages in the hospital.
Absolutely.
So we would wash them and cut them up into strips, hang them up in the sun, and iron them. Then Dad would tell me what size he wanted and how much of a roll he wanted. So I would spend my day rolling up these bandages and having them for him. And I felt important. I felt useful. I felt that I was helping a big man who I knew was saving lives.
Yes, and at 13, you decided you had a little dream, which was completely unrealistic for a girl in your country who is denied education. But tell us what that dream was when you were 13.
My dream was that one day I would build a hospital. I would build a kind of hospital my father would have liked to work in. And I didn't know how, I didn't know where, I didn't know what with, but I knew that my father needed a better hospital than what he was working in.
Yes.
And I'd heard that repeatedly from him. And I thought, well, one day I'm going to do that. That's the gift I'm going to do for my dad. I'll build him a hospital.
And that was an incredible dream for somebody who at 8 years old had suffered the shock and horror of FGM at the hands of your mother and grandmother. When your father was out of town, they deliberately chose the timing because they knew he would disapprove. And you were also denied an education. In fact, you got your education by eavesdropping on the boys' studies from the neighborhood. But nevertheless, you persisted, and your father sent you to a school, and somebody recognized your talent. And what happened next in 1954?
In 1954, well, first I was sent after teaching myself to read and write and learning the alphabet. I was sent to Djibouti because there were no schools for girls in my country, Somaliland. Only boys went to school, and the nearest school that a girl could attend was in French Somaliland, where my mother's sister, my maternal aunt, was a school teacher. So it all went very well. I was sent to my aunt to go to school. Everybody thought that, oh my God, going to school is bad enough, but getting her to learn French, what good is that going to be? And thank goodness I was sent to Djibouti, because French became my first foreign language, and a language that I love very much.
Yes.
And a language that has served me well in life with the UN, with all my travels. So that's where I went to school. And then in 1952, came back to Somaliland and became an interpreter for a female doctor, Dr. Ash. Whenever women would be telling her their problems, she would need someone to explain the complaints. And that was also the first time I had seen a female doctor. I didn't even know that women could become doctors.
Yes.
Medicine was a magical profession that only big men like my dad could do it.
Yes.
And I was passionate about what she was doing, and it was again another person who was doing the same thing, saving lives, running to a patient, dealing with emergencies. And I thought, my goodness, this is, I loved. That was a great role model. I'm sure Dr. Ash is somewhere where good people go in the next life. She was a good woman.
And then you won your scholarship to London.
Then I won a scholarship. They made me become a school teacher because that was the only thing, she, told the British, you don't waste her time on being my interpreter because she could do better things than that. And they needed a school, they needed pupil teachers. So they conscripted me to become a helper for the first British school teachers who were running the first school for girls in Somaliland. And from there, I sat for exams. I had my secondary school education, changing my thoughts, my philosophies from French, the history of French, to the British. And in 1954, I won a scholarship, sat for an exam with many other boys, and became the first girl to win a scholarship. And I was sent to Britain. And I was trained on British taxpayers' money. I went to the Borough Polytechnic, did the pre-nursing course because I wasn't old enough to start nursing, and my English wasn't good enough at that time. And I needed to have my GCE, my O-levels. So I was allowed to do a pre-nursing course. A year after I started that course, the Colonial Office, who were my supervisors, and who would be getting my reports and my progress and my marks. Colonel Crook, bless his soul, another great person who was who looked after overseas students from East Africa, and also became a second parent for me, and him and his sister, his daughter, and his family became my next family in Britain. And Colonel Crook from the British Colonial Office read all his, the reports and said, very good, that's very good, very impressed, they're exemplary, And I was offered to do medicine, change my scholarship from nursing to medicine. But because I was a bird brain little 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, I said, no, medicine is going to take too long. I stuck to nursing.
Thank goodness you did.
I'm sorry?
Thank goodness you did.
Looking back in retrospect, I say, well, thank goodness I did, because had I not done midwifery, had I not had women delivering in the bush, in huts, in villages, had I not trained so many young people, I don't think I could have had the tenacity to stick to the midwifery, because I could not. To train doctors would have been too complicated for me.
Yes, absolutely.
But training nurses and midwives was within my competence, because as a nurse, as a staff nurse, as a ward in charge, that's what we do. We train junior staff.
And you came back to Somaliland in 1961, full of hope and hoping to work alongside your father, which had always been your dream. And unfortunately for you, 1961 turned out to be one of the worst years of your life, because your father dropped dead of a heart attack. And then there was a civil war, which changed everything for your country. I
know. I thought there was a civil war. I lost my dad. 10 days later, there was the civil war. It was also the time when I was working in a hospital that I was trained in Britain. I was trained to work in British standards in British hospitals and with British, all the different hierarchies of the staff nurses and the sisters and the matrons and the supervisors and the doctors and the consultants and the registrars and there were all these layers of people who would always tell you what to do and who you could always call and say, oh, I have a problem, what do I do? Somebody had a solution for it. But then I was thrown into it knee deep. I was running a hospital. I was running the female section of a hospital. I wasn't trained to apply forceps. I wasn't trained to get a placenta out. All I would tell somebody, I can't get a placenta out. Can the registrar come and do it? Or the houseman. But I was all they had.
Yes.
And the other person, the only doctor we had, Dr. Ali, was running the hospital, doing amputations and doing all kinds of operations, couldn't, tear himself away to come and do what he felt I should be doing and should get familiar with doing.
And as if that wasn't enough, you had all sorts of opposition from the local people. The women that you were trying to help weren't used to coming to hospital. They didn't have babies in hospitals.
Of course not.
And you had no opportunity to teach them until you had a wonderful experience with a spiritual healer and you helped her. And that was, you said, worth more than any certificate with your name from Britain.
Absolutely. Hammersmith Hospital, Lewisham Hospital, Royal College of Midwives. No way. It was the word of that spiritual healer.
Yes.
That
life you saved her life, you saved the life of her baby.
Yeah.
And then you set about training your people in midwifery and educating young women, and people started to respect you. And then in 1963, a man called Mohammed Iqbal came into your life, who you'd met briefly in London. And of course, you ended up marrying him, and he ended up becoming Prime Minister. So by 1968, you were not just a midwife, not just a person running a hospital, but you were on a world tour with the Prime Minister of your country as the Prime Minister's wife, and you ended up in the White House meeting President Johnson. Tell us a little about that.
Oh, that was a fantastic experience. We had a world tour. We were invited, well, first it was Italy. Prime Minister Fanfani and the Italian government, and then it was the US as a guest of President Johnson and Lady Bird. We were flown in on the presidential helicopter from the airport to the West Lawn of the White House with a 21-gun salute and the Guard of Honor and the red tape and the band. That was the first time I'd seen that, and it was a great honor. It was a great pomp and pageantry. And then from there, we flew to Germany, West Germany, with Chancellor Kissinger and his wife. There we were hosted for a week, and it was Munich, it was Bonn, it was Cologne, it was Frankfurt, great cities in Germany. Again, red carpets, guns, 21-gun salutes, banquets, beautiful gowns. And then from there we went to Britain as guests of the British government, and Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister at the time. And of course, my husband did have the chance to visit Her Majesty the Queen. I was not. It was a courtesy visit with the Prime Minister, and that was, unfortunately, I met Her Majesty the Queen later as an ambassador's wife.
Yes.
So those, there were the days of travel.
Just a completely different life to what you'd had.
But then, Wendy, this is when I felt I could do more for my people, rather than attending coffee parties and just wearing gowns and ball gowns and attending ceremonial occasions. I felt this is what I can do. This is I'm the time when I can change things. So I continued a bargain with my husband that I would work for 2 days in the week in a hospital. And of course, again, that caused a revolution. The Prime Minister's wife doesn't work. Maybe other Prime Minister's wives don't need to work, but I need to work. I need to teach.
Yes.
And I'm not costing you any money anyway. And I would be more useful for the nation teaching, continuing to teach my students, demonstrating compassion, demonstrating quality of care, demonstrating to students how patients should be looked after, and in instilling that the protocols of human rights and human values.
Yes.
And values shouldn't be based on somebody's bank account or how much jewelry they have around their necks or not. But it's a person who is sick and who needs us. A woman in labor and carrying a baby is 2 lives.
Yes.
And this was a wonderful teaching moment for me.
Yes.
To go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning in my uniform, on time, teaching punctuality, and delivering my patients and examining them and sorting out, the ones who delivered and the babies, and cleaning out the cords and the umbilical cords and the dressings. I could not have taught many of the tasks that I could teach firsthand in a classroom.
No. And of course,
And
the sad thing was that the next thing that happened was that you were actually out of the country when the president of Somalia was assassinated in 1969. Your husband decided to return against advice, I think, and of course
yeah,
was immediately placed under
yeah,
arrest. And I think he then remained under arrest for a number of years. And instead of
yeah.
staying in the safety of London, which you could have done, you chose to voluntarily go home and find out what had happened to him. And of course, you were then
I
placed under house arrest and suffered many, many years of persecution at the
often
hands of
dignity,
the regime.
humiliation, and hardship. But I could not live anywhere but where my people were. And my husband is in jail, my brother, my mother, my sister, my family, my home, my pets, my pet animals, my cheetah, my lynx, my cat. I had responsibilities and I had a family. And 21 days after the coup, I had to come back.
Yes.
And I sent a telegram to my brother. There were telegrams in those days. No telephone, no long distance calls, to say that I was coming on flight X, Y, and Z. And of course, the security people were waiting for me at the airport. My brother was never given the telegram. So nobody in my family knew that I was coming back on that particular day. And the security people, met me at the foot of the plane and said, of course, gave me all the protocols of the First Lady. I'm assuming that they're still treating me like a First Lady. And said, you have your tags, your baggage tags. So I gave them, and said, and the passport, we need to stamp it. So I gave them the passport, my diplomatic passport, of course. And then they took me aside to a side of the airport. My suitcase appeared. Got into the car, and assuming they were driving me home. But my mother's house is in one direction, and my house is in another direction. So they're not driving the car in the direction of my house. So I said, well, by the way, where are you taking me? Because this is not the way to my house. And he said, no, of course not, but we thought you would like to see your mother first. Okay, that made sense. So we got to my house, to my mother's house. They gave me my suitcase. And they said, you're now under house arrest. You're not allowed to come out of the house. Anybody coming in to see you will be searched. Anybody coming out with things will be searched and arrested. There's going to be a police car at your door. And that's it.
And of course, your house itself, your main house, had been requisitioned, had been overrun with soldiers. They had killed your animals. They shot your...
They took everything. They shot my animals.
Yeah.
And that was it. I had no clothes. Look, the clothes I had were the clothes I was wearing in Europe, and not appropriate,
no.
In the climate of my country. And I had, I need my just regular clothes that you wear in the house. You don't wear gowns and things in your house.
No.
And everything was gone. Everything was taken, including my jewelry that I was keeping in safety. I was keeping in safety, quote and unquote, in my house for the soldiers to loot.
Yes, but
that was a bad time.
Not to be daunted, you decided 6 months in that you'd had enough of this, and when there was a fire at a local, a big hotel, a big fire in a hotel in Hargeisa, you just walked out of your house and told the police officers, I'm going to help at the hospital, that's where I'm going to be, you're welcome to follow me. And of course, you just walked out, you defied everything, you worked for several days there non-stop. When you eventually came home, there were no more policemen outside your house, so you were free. But your husband was not free. He was still in prison. Tell me about what you did to let him know that you were safe and that you were thinking of him.
Well, once I was out of the house, because when I was under house arrest, I relied on messages that were carried by people. Sometimes, they were a bit, I didn't know whether to believe it or not. All kinds of rumors, all kinds of, they were going to be executed, they were going to be killed, they were going to be freed. There was, the good, the bad, you never knew what to. And I'm sure he was getting the same kind of messages from my side. He didn't know where I was. He left me in London.
Yes.
That was it. He refused to bring me back. He said, no, revolutions in Africa are very, you never know how they end up. So you stay in London and I'll send for you when, things are safe. And then, of course, when he came back, he went to jail and he remained incommunicado. So the only way I could let him know that I was alive was I got a car, and we always had our favorite music, our favorite records, tapes. So I got a tape that we both loved very much by Ella Fitzgerald. These foolish things remind me of you. And of course, I'm a bit of an old romantic. And it's a song we both love, a song I love very much. So I put this into the player of my car and drove as close as possible to where they were arrested, because it was not only my husband, but the whole cabinet was arrested. The whole, there was about 40 something of them. So I stopped on the bridge where the sound would carry furthest, put the air out of my tire, flattened it, took the knob out of the record player, of the tape player of the car, the volume right up, and I took it out. And so, of course, cars would go by, and the police came because there's a car obstructing one lane, the bridge. And say, yeah, move your car. I said, yeah, I know, I want to do that, but I can't. I have a tire. I have a punctured tire. So they would try and change it. I said, I can't. I don't know how to change tires. I knew how to change tires. I always change my own tires. So by the time they got the jacks and these things and the bolts and the spare tire, and my song and another song had finished playing, full blast. Turn the volume down. I can't. It's broken. It doesn't have a So that's how we got.
And you found out that Mohammed did hear it. Somebody heard it and called him, and he knew it was you. He knew it was.
And then I did this a few weeks later again. And made sure that it was not the same policeman, the same place. Same thing again. And somebody went to him and said, your wife's playing your music again. Your wife's playing it. So they, he listened, and then the music stopped. And then it was later I found out that he had heard it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And then eventually the letters write to each other, but the letters were so censored, and half the pages were blackened out.
Yes.
And it was just a...
You refused to give up. You kept going. You had to go into a boot camp, a communism boot camp for a while. You had to do various things, but nevertheless you prevailed. You prevailed.
Ideas out of my head. So exactly. I was sent to a boot camp at age 38. At age 38, mind you. It was the best exercise I've ever done. I mean, you get up at 4. You march, you jump, you run, you parade, you climb, dunes. You have backpacks. When I think of it now, the things we did. Anyway, that was my life. And then, of course, later, all this thing interfered with my marriages, and I married again, and it didn't work, and hospitals got in the way. And eventually, in 1986, and then I started building a hospital. I couldn't build a hospital in my country, Somaliland. Somalia refused to give me the license for that. So I thought, well, I'm going to build it. My dad's dead anyway. I'm going to build it in Mogadishu, in Somalia. Put in everything I had. But then so much opposition, so much corruption, so much interference.
Yes.
They would stop me from building. They would stop me from, all kinds of things. Eventually, I lost my money. Went back to WHO in 86, full time.
Yes,
and
you had a very leading and important job in the World Health Organization at that point. And that was really what saved you. And you were allowed to, you were able to travel, you were able to live in different parts of the country and different other countries and work with everything. And the great thing that happened was in 1991, this tyrannical despot, Siad Barre, was deposed and the civil war in your country ended. And typical Edna, when everyone said that your town, your Hargeisa was leveled, that there was nothing left of it, you immediately went back and decided to rebuild your father's house and you decided to stay and support your country when other people were too afraid to come home because you wanted to set the example. And that's what you did in 1990.
Well, I didn't come back immediately. I was based in Djibouti, which is next door. I was working for the UN, and of course, my job as the UN, with the WHO representative, required that I go to Somaliland and monitor the situation there. What is the health situation? Are there any epidemics, any diseases, and do they have water? So many of us UN people were being sent to Somaliland. Yes. But then this was my country and my people, and I felt that there was a need for me to put much more than what I did as an assignment. Yes. And I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rebuild my father's house.
Yes, which is what you did, of course. And at the same time, your husband was, around the same time, your ex-husband, Mohammed, your first husband, was elected president. And that was great because you were still very good friends, and he was able to sort of help you and so on. And then in 1995, by which time you were, I think, fairly high up in women's health in your country, you decided to, for the first time, to talk about FGM, to talk about what had happened to you, and to start a public campaign.
Yeah, I was sent to Somaliland by WHO on several missions, and one of them was a World AIDS Day, was one occasion, and then another occasion was to talk about female genital mutilation to my people in our language, and of course, as somebody who, thank goodness, I'm trusted. People trust me. I've served them well throughout my whole life. And WHO felt that if anybody could, bring this, thing into the open.
Something that's never been discussed publicly before, never.
And by the way, this is something that I've just finished now. I think you gotta, this is it's online. It's a picture book about FGM.
Very good.
In English and in Somali.
Great.
So this is I don't have the Somali version. Yes, I do.
I mean, it's a lifelong campaign for you, isn't it? It's a lifelong campaign.
Because even as recently as a few months ago, we had a child who had been cut up in the morning and who was brought in as an emergency bleeding. So it happens. It happens when it shouldn't be happening. So anyway, came back to Somaliland, about to retire in 97, built my dad's house. This way I could get my family out of the way, because if I built a hospital before building the family house, I'd say, you wasted all your family money.
You'd already caused enough trouble in your family. You were already controversial. You had to
build a family house. And what I do with my money, I can blow it on a yacht, I can blow it on a hospital. That's my money.
And that's the thing. You decided to build this hospital in 1998, having retired from the World Health Organization age 60. I think you went on an acclimatization course where people were talking about what they were going to do in retirement, maybe buy a boat and sail around the Mediterranean for a while, or buy a house in the sun. But you said, no, I'm going to build a hospital. You sold all your jewelry, your car. You cashed in your entitlement, your pension entitlement that you could, and you started to build a hospital quite literally brick by brick, living on the site with no running water, no electricity. And 1998 you began, and it was officially opened in 2002. And you earned the respect of the world for it.
I love my people, and today, in fact, I had a meeting with a room full of young people. There's one young lady and the rest were male. Of course, we're always, the minority, women. But there was one veterinarian. And I said, well, thank goodness, I also have daughters. And we're planning to start a veterinary course, veterinary health in Somaliland and agriculture.
Wonderful.
So to be able to do that on a site that was once a killing ground, where Ziad Barre and the communist regime in Somalia used to execute the people of Somaliland, for us to be healing people, saving lives, and now teaching our young people how to save animals as well.
Yes.
There's no bigger blessing than that.
No.
What did my jewelry do for me? It was always in a locked up something in a bank or being insured or whatever. I hardly ever wore them. I didn't like them anyway. I'm happy with beads and whatever. But today, it could give me this. It could give me this opportunity to live. I mean, I've lived in this building since 8 months before the hospital was open.
Yes, yes, and are still there.
And I still live here.
Still helping, still teaching.
When I was foreign minister, I received many delegations. Many a delegation I met here in my office. This is my office.
Yes.
And well, why not? This is my choice.
You have a wonderful maxim, which is, if I don't do it, who will?
We're buying a yacht. We're buying a sort of a communication something for a yacht. We're upgrading it with this or a motor that does that. And they say, well, what are you going to do when you retire? And I say, oh, well, I'm going to build a hospital. No. After you retire. So yes, after I retire, I'm going to build a hospital. Why?
And
because I want to. That's my yacht.
And
the only thing is, my yacht is on ground. Your yacht is on the high seas. This is my yacht. This is my dream. This is my passion.
And you've made it happen, and you've made it happen so beautifully. I mean, when you appeared on Desert Island Discs with the BBC, I loved it because your final disc and the one you would keep would be Robert Frost. I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep.
Miles to go before I sleep. I have miles to go.
Certainly doing that. And my last question really for you, Edna, now is, your father, I think, would be so enormously proud. And I mean, he was your inspiration. He is your hero still. And do you do it all in his name still?
I think my family has grown. Of the people I admire, my parents, yes, but it's my people. It's 4 million Somalilanders who've been so bruised and abused and mistreated by Somalia that, when a country was leveled to the ground, where people were massacred by the thousands, to be able to do what I'm doing today is in honor of those 250,000 people, innocent people who were killed because they believed, in that country, and that they believed in themselves, and that's it. And I'm sure my father would approve, because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. You've done that your whole life. You've done that your whole life.
And I'm hard-headed, but I'm hard-headed for the things that are right. Absolutely. And somebody's got to speak for them, and somebody's got to stand up and say, no, you cannot do that to a pregnant woman. You cannot do that to a sick old man. You cannot do that to a human being, period.
Yes.
Because nobody's done that to you. No. So don't do it to others.
Bless you.
I'm blessed. And this hospital has taught me so many people. I never would have gotten to know you if I hadn't built a hospital. I wouldn't have gotten to know the hundreds and thousands of other people around the world who I am so privileged and so blessed to consider among my dearest friends.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. Do please, if you get a chance, wave the paperback around, Edna, please. Do please get a chance to read this about this remarkable
chapter about FGM.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's also there's the pictures and,
got everything going for it. It has.
Yeah. So, I know, I can't. So, yeah, anyway. That's my life. That's what I do. Babies.
Absolutely. Lots of babies. All the babies, hundreds and hundreds of babies.
I love it.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we look forward to speaking to you again sometime soon. Thank you.